You've been eating sugar your entire life. But here's the part nobody tells you. You probably don't even know what sugar actually is. Because sugar isn't just that white powder in your kitchen. It's not just sweets, desserts, or soda. It's hiding in your bread, your sauces, your fruits, even your healthy snacks. And here's where it gets interesting. Not all sugars behave the same inside your body. Some give you quick energy. Some go straight to your liver. Some spike your blood sugar like crazy. And others quietly mess with your metabolism without you even noticing. So when people say, cut sugar, what are they actually talking about? That's exactly what we're breaking down. Every major type of sugar. Where it comes from. How it tastes. What it does. And the surprising roles it plays in your daily life. Because once you understand sugar, you'll never look at food the same way again. Let's start with the most basic one. Glucose. Glucose is the foundation. If sugars were a language, glucose would be the alphabet. It's naturally found in fruits, vegetables, and even inside your bloodstream right now. Your body produces it. Your cells depend on it. And your brain? It runs almost entirely on glucose. What makes glucose unique is how directly it's used. The moment you eat it, it enters your bloodstream and becomes instant fuel. No detours. No complicated processing. Just energy. In terms of taste, glucose is mildly sweet. Not overpowering. More subtle than table sugar. Almost clean and simple. That's why it's rarely used alone in foods. But when it is, it's often in sports drinks or medical settings where fast energy matters. Here's something most people don't realize. Your body fights to keep glucose levels stable at all times. Too high? It releases insulin. Too low? It triggers hunger, shakiness, even anxiety. So when you eat high glucose foods, you're not just eating. You're triggering a full internal response system. And that's where the story starts getting deeper. Because glucose doesn't work alone. Meet fructose. Fructose is often called fruit sugar. It naturally comes from fruits, honey, and some vegetables. Sounds healthy, right? Well, yes and no. Here's what makes fructose different. Unlike glucose, it doesn't go straight into your bloodstream. Instead, it takes a detour. Straight to your liver. Your liver processes fructose almost like a toxin. In small amounts, it handles it just fine. But in large amounts, it starts converting it into fat. That's the part most people never hear. Fructose is actually sweeter than glucose. Much sweeter. That's why it's heavily used in processed foods. It enhances flavor without needing large quantities. The texture it creates is smooth and rich, which is why it's common in syrups and sweetened beverages. And here's the twist. When you eat whole fruit, fructose isn't a problem, because fiber slows everything down. But when it's isolated and concentrated, that's when things change. That's when it becomes something else entirely. And that leads us to something you've definitely had before. Sucrose. This is what most people think of as sugar. Table sugar. The white crystals sitting in your kitchen. Sucrose is actually a combination of glucose and fructose. 50% glucose, 50% fructose. Which means when you eat it, you get both effects at once. A quick spike in energy, and a slower, liver-based processing happening at the same time. It's like hitting two systems in your body simultaneously. That's why sucrose feels so satisfying, so complete, so addictive. In terms of taste, it's balanced sweetness. Not too sharp, not too subtle, just right. That's why it became the standard. You'll find sucrose everywhere. Baked goods, candy, soft drinks, even foods you wouldn't expect. Here's something surprising. Sucrose wasn't always this common. Centuries ago, it was rare, expensive, a luxury. Now, it's everywhere. And that shift changed the way we eat and the way our bodies respond to food. But sugar doesn't stop there. Let's talk about lactose. Lactose is known as milk sugar. It comes from dairy products like milk, cheese, and yogurt. And it's made of two parts, glucose and galactose. What makes lactose unique is how your body handles it. To digest lactose, your body needs an enzyme called lactase. Without it, you can't properly break it down. That's why some people experience lactose intolerance, bloating, gas, discomfort, because the sugar isn't being absorbed correctly. Taste-wise, lactose is much less sweet than other sugars. In fact, it's one of the least sweet sugars, which is why milk doesn't taste overly sugary despite containing it. Its texture contribution is subtle but important. It adds creaminess and body. That's why it's essential in dairy-based products. Here's an interesting fact. Most of the world's population actually loses the ability to digest lactose after childhood, which means being able to drink milk comfortably as an adult is more of an exception than the rule. Now let's move to something less talked about. Maltose. Maltose is often called malt sugar. It forms when starch breaks down, so you'll find it in things like bread, beer, and cereals, especially when grains are processed or fermented. Maltose is made of two glucose molecules, so when you consume it, it behaves similarly to glucose, but slightly slower. Its sweetness is mild, less intense than sucrose, almost earthy. That's why it's commonly used in brewing. It adds depth rather than sharp sweetness. In texture, maltose contributes a soft, slightly sticky quality, which is why it's used in baked goods. It helps with browning and structure. Here's something fascinating. During digestion, many of the starchy foods you eat actually turn into maltose before becoming glucose, which means even if you think you're avoiding sugar, your body is still producing it internally. And that's the pattern you're starting to see. Sugar isn't just something you add. It's something your body constantly interacts with. But now we're stepping into a different category. Added sugars. These aren't naturally occurring. They're introduced during processing. And this is where things get complicated. Let's start with high fructose corn syrup. This one has a reputation, and for good reason. High fructose corn syrup, or HFCS, is made from cornstarch that's processed into glucose and then partially converted into fructose. The result? A liquid sweetener with a higher fructose content than regular sugar. Its biggest advantage is cost. It's cheap, easy to produce, and extremely versatile. Taste-wise, it's intensely sweet, but also smooth, almost too smooth. It blends into drinks and foods effortlessly, which is exactly why it's used in sodas, sauces, and packaged snacks. Here's the catch. Because it's liquid, your body absorbs it faster, which can lead to quicker spikes and heavier metabolic load. And since it's everywhere, it's incredibly easy to overconsume without realizing. But HFCS is just one example. There's also invert sugar. This one sounds technical, but it's simpler than it seems. Invert sugar is created by breaking sucrose into its two components, glucose and fructose. So instead of being bonded together, they exist separately. Why does that matter? Because it makes the sugar sweeter and more stable. It prevents crystallization, which is why it's used in syrups, candies, and baked goods. It keeps things smooth, consistent, visually appealing. Its taste is slightly more intense than regular sugar. And its texture? Silky, glossy, perfect for confectionery. Here's something interesting. Honey is actually a natural form of invert sugar, which explains its smooth texture and long shelf life. And that brings us to one of the oldest sweeteners in human history, honey. Honey is produced by bees from flower nectar. It's one of the few sugars that comes almost ready to eat in nature. Its composition is mainly fructose and glucose, along with trace enzymes, minerals, and antioxidants. What makes honey unique is its complexity. It's not just sweet. It has layers, floral notes, earthy tones, even slight bitterness depending on the source. Its texture is thick, sticky, and rich, which makes it perfect for drizzling, mixing, or baking. Uses range from tea sweeteners to natural remedies. And here's the fascinating part. Honey never spoils. Archaeologists have found jars of honey thousands of years old, still perfectly edible. That's how stable it is. But even honey is still sugar. And that's where the conversation gets real. Because no matter how natural something is, your body still processes it in similar ways. And as you're starting to see, not all sugars are equal, but none of them are irrelevant. Every type has a role, a function, an effect. And this is just the beginning. Because, in the next part, we're going deeper into hidden sugars, artificial sweeteners, and the ones marketed as healthy alternatives that might not be what they seem.